Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's HFTP Hangout. I am Barbara Semerero, Chapter Manager, along with Brittany Brewster. She's the Membership Director, and we are going to be hosting today's Hangout for you. The title of the Hangout is How to Achieve Near-Term Returns on a Long-Term Hotel Vision, i.e. also known as Bringing Hotels to the Speed of Modern Innovation. So hotels are in a category that are facing significant challenges in global travel trends over the next 5 years. And this can include the growth of wellness, dealing with labor challenges, appealing to hybrid travelers, technology-driven personalization, experiential travel, and so much more. And knowing that these are going to impact hotels doesn't necessarily help when executives have to seek returns on a quarterly basis. So today's Hangout will discuss these trends while framing them in terms of how hotel brands can implement the necessary changes that will deliver in both the short and the long term. So Adam Mogilonsky Sky is our speaker. Sorry, Adam.
No worries.
So Adam attended the Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, earning a Bachelor of Science degree with a life sciences subject of specialization in pre-medicine. Well, on the path to become a doctor, he instead opted to pursue a personal training while studying to be a nutritionist and physiotherapist. And then following the 2008-2009 recession, Adam joined Larry in the advertising world and then transitioned over to Hotel Mogul as the now managing the consultancy's operations, which also includes the financial analysis for hotels, team training, and software or hardware development. With an eye for what's possible in the future, Adam is at heart a pragmatist, evaluating solutions on their ability to address immediate needs, while also providing a roadmap for continuous improvement. Now, outside of this strategic planning role for hotel brands and owners, he also represents one half of the company's thought leadership arm and is frequently writing articles under the dual byline for numerous hotel trade publications on a variety of topics. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Adam to address the group.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. My name is Adam Mogilonsky. I'm going to be talking a little bit fast to cover the material today to leave as much time as possible for Q&A at the end, where I'll answer your questions by talking even faster. So let's get started here. We are talking about some underlying processes, so save all your questions for the end or write them into the chat. Oh wait, hold on. I don't have the ability to click onto next. Oh wait, there we go. Okay, so about me, I am one half of Hotel Mogul in terms of the partner level, and we work as strategic advisors for hotels. So we work with owners and corporate level to help solve problems. And increasingly what we found is that all those problems, whether we're coming at it from operations, finance, technology, sales and marketing, it always depends on the underlying process. And concurrent to that, we've published a lot of articles and somewhere along the way found time to organize those into 7 books. So enough about me. Here's what we're going to be covering in a nutshell to help organize everything here. So I want to start off by discussing 2 quotes here. The first one you probably already implicitly know, but maybe haven't heard of it, called as Amara's Law, which is what it is, where we have all this hype about a new technology in the short run, and then over time we forget about it, and then it comes back and slowly comes to dominate our lives. The next one here, you're probably wondering, what does Alice in Wonderland have to do with technology? And it comes back to this quote about running as fast as you can, then you end up in the same place. So I call that the Red Queen problem, specifically for hotel innovation, where we have all these new technologies coming at us, very similar to how email and websites were coming at us in the late 90s, similar to the dot-com boom and then bust. But the problem now is that the pace of innovation outside of hospitality is happening so fast that by the time we get caught up to it, the world is already going to be moved on to another way. And this is what we call technological displacement. So here are some of the problems, or I should say challenges, that we're going to be facing over the next decade. These are long-term problems that we have to address in some way, shape, or form. I'm not going to go through every single one here. We could write a whole other webinar on each individual one. Just want to show you how much different things there are vying for your time and your budget. And all of these relate back to technology and process and finance in one way, shape, or form. So part of your job, you may feel like that dog on the right-hand side. And the issue with all of these problems coming at us in one way, shape, or form, whether over a quarter, over a year, over a decade, is this problem of shopper's paralysis, which is to say, you give a person 3 options, they can choose one. You give a person 23 options, and they get overwhelmed and choose none. So that's the problem we're at right now, where coming out of the pandemic, there's so much coming at us that we are sort of stymied in terms of what to do. And what we need to do is we need to become more agile in how we make decisions and how we work as a team, so that way we can better systematically tackle all of these individual obstacles and challenges to really, really ramp up our organization on the revenue side, on the cost saving sides, and really set us up for a long-term business growth cycle. So the quote I draw in here, and this is from experience, is a lot of times we care so much about our product, about our hotels, about the guest experience. We try to make things perfect right off the top. And what ends up happening is that we spend too much time in the planning process instead of getting it to a reasonably good place, launching, and then having a process for continual improvement post-launch. And it all comes back to this quote by Voltaire. This isn't me, it's something that's existed throughout time. And within that, really, we need to be more agile. We need to be more agile in how we make decisions. So a little bit of self-promotion about me is we developed this and we observed this process innovation obstacle. And from there, we developed our teams and tech audit, whereby we were brought in to look at technology stacks and how to find the solution. But really, we found that the technology, it doesn't matter about the technology to hotel. The technology is only as good as the teams that are using that technology. You cannot replace the teams behind the tech. So we have our TNT, like dynamite. When you fix and upgrade the teams and the technology, it's like dynamite for improving your process. So when we come in and we're talking about process innovation, the most important thing to think about with this whole idea of perfect versus good enough is the time. What are you losing in that time interval between implementing 3 months from now versus 3 years from now? And that is a big thing to understand because of this technology displacement, of this Red Queen problem we have, where with AI now, with Web3 coming out, with the metaverse, whatever it is, who knows where we're going to be 3 years from now? We need to implement faster with good enough solutions that then have a proper process in place for bringing that up to speed post-launch. So when we're sitting down with people at the management level, at the corporate level, at the executive level, at the ownership level, when we're talking about opportunity costs, we've broken it down into these 5 levels, which is a lot of text on the page here, but you can see here that to break these down, if you don't implement, for instance, within number 1, a very, very good user interface for your booking engine, guests may be turned off. They may go back to an OTA because the OTA is offering a better booking experience that they feel more comfortable to do from desktop and from mobile. So you're going to lose rooms revenue in one way, shape, or form because you're not able to merchandise, you're not able to package. They're going to your competitors because your competitor has a better UI and therefore is more trusted, or they're going to an OTA, so you're losing out on net rates and net revenues. Number 2, ancillary spend is, again, you're not able to properly market to your guests in a pre-arrival experience. So you're not hitting them with proper contextual based marketing to say, hey, for instance, we see you're coming in 7 days from now. Why don't we book you in for breakfast to make sure we can secure that dining reservation? Just an example there. As well, now we're getting into number 3 and 4, which is your teams. So your teams, they don't want to do these monotonous tasks. It depletes morale, and that can lead to problems, hidden problems that you may not see. But those problems ultimately, combined with number 1 and 2, they do affect ultimately the valuation. And this is really where owners and everyone cares about, because what is evaluation? What is an evaluation? It all comes down to top line and bottom line, and that's where these 4 come in. Opportunity costs, that's what we're missing. So importantly, when we're talking about process innovation, what we need to address is the J word, which is jobs. Hospitality right now has a labor problem. No jobs are being replaced. What we're talking about is automating tasks so that way we can bring more high touch of personal service back into hospitality. We automate tasks so that way every team member can be more guest facing, can deliver more personalized service, can activate that next level of experience to both increase the guest satisfaction and to drive more revenues in one way, shape, or form. So what does task automation look like? Well, on the revenue side, we're trying to do all these things on the left-hand column, all these big tasks that you're probably thinking about in one way, shape, or form. But realistically, all the revenue side comes down to the personnel side. What's happening behind the scenes in terms of all these various processes to implement the systems on the left-hand side that are going to generate that revenue. It all comes down to how teams work together to implement the systems that are going to grow your business. So the word here to remember, and again, I'm introducing a lot of words maybe. The word here I want you to remember is busy work. So you have the work, which is the business plan, the tech evaluation and roadmap, those spreadsheets that you're filling out to show everything and really drill down to make the work happen. The busy work is the stuff around the work, those little email notifications, the distracting text messages, the setting up of meetings, the meetings themselves where there isn't a direct call to action in the end. We need to reduce the busy work because it's interruptive. It may be small, it may be short in terms of how it's doing, but because it's interruptive, it is silently demoralizing, and therefore it is a small point of job site stress. I call this the death by 1,000 cuts, because it isn't that one thing that demoralizes you. It's those, you get in it at 8:30 in the morning and you have 300 emails waiting for you in your inbox that are fresh and unopened. That's a slog to get through before you get down to the real work. So how do we eliminate busy work? Number one, we do have too many meetings. This is a problem. And I would say there's a difference between in-person meetings where you're meeting with people in the flesh versus these Zoom calls, which can actually induce eye burn. And you feel it drained on your eyes. And the brains don't really work that way, where you can go, you have a Zoom meeting at 1 p.m. Then you're expected to do 1 hour of solid concentrated work to fill out an Excel spreadsheet. Then you have another Zoom meeting at 3 p.m. The brain doesn't work in terms of automatically switching tasks that way, particularly if it's screen-based task to screen-based task to screen-based task. Your brain likely needs a break in one way, shape, or form. So we need to figure out how to better systematize meetings. So here are some things that I have seen work and I have helped implement that work. I would emphasize here that every organization is different. Therefore, every solution needs to be bespoke to that organization. So a few to call out here is this whole idea of systematizing meetings. We can make the meetings shorter by having an agenda and sticking to it, and ensuring that people are not tardy for those meetings as much as we would like. And then, of course, we could have fewer people in the meetings where one person is the designated minute taker and then distributes those minutes after the meeting, so that way people can be caught up to speed. And then, of course, every meeting can have people who are assigned specific tasks at the end. We can cluster the meetings on specific days, so that way you could have, say, Thursday and Friday specifically for concentrated work, where you develop those business plans that are going to move the needle forward. Two companies I want to call out. Number one is Amazon. So Amazon for a while has had their 2 pizzas rule, which is to say, if a meeting has more people in it than can be adequately fed by 2 pizzas, the meeting has too many people. And then earlier this year, you can look at Shopify's calendar purge, which they initiated at the beginning of January this year, where the top level admins went into every single person's meeting and eliminated all recurring calendar meetings from their schedule. And then they went through and grouped all hands meetings onto various days. They forced managers to call out who needed to be in meetings and everything along those lines. You can look it up. It was a big news story. The bottom line here is systematizing and automating meetings. And this whole idea at the end here of flow, which is to say, it takes, when we're talking about the real work, the concentration, the concentrated creative work, it takes a while for the brain to get into that flow state, around 20 minutes, let's say. So if you're constantly bouncing from task to task, you're never really going to get into that flow state, that state where you're really getting deep into the work and working efficiently with it. So you need to give some thought to flow blocks of, let's say, blocking off an entire morning just for one task. Next is more on the technology side, but still has to do with the team side. This whole idea of data integrations, getting consolidated platforms. And the whole idea is to build TRevPAR, total revenue, or revenue per guest, looking at how to grow revenue, not just within the room silo, but looking at all departments and how to really get guests to use all your facilities to thereby drive the total revenue you generate across restaurant, spa, valet if you're charging for it, room service, golf if you have it, everything. And for that, we need the team objectives to be aligned. So this is an important stat to think about when we're thinking about consolidated systems, which is to say there was a study done in UC Irvine, 566 times on the average day switching screens. And every time you switch screens, your brain has to reorient itself. So that is, again, it's death by 1,000 cuts, where it's not that single time you're switching screens, but cumulatively, by switching screens all the time, it implements a point of stress. It means you have to remember more numbers as you're cross-referencing instead of those numbers being automatically pushed through. This is a direct support for why we need more data integrations, more system integrations, more actionable insights with AI to help us sort through all that data to make it happen. And I threw this in here because it's not just me who's calling attention to this relationship between data automation and this whole idea of job site stress. This is something that Deloitte has pointed out in terms of the push now for employee well-being to encourage employees to stay with companies, to reduce burnout, to reduce turnover. So they have codified this, and it's something that I'm a big believer in as well. While I take a drinking break, I'm just going to let you read this point of sarcasm here. Okay, I hope everyone gets it, that this is a point of sarcasm here, and that we're coming in here for hotels. We want to be guest facing. We don't come in every day just to look at our email inbox. It can be demoralizing. And this is very important as we're trying to encourage the next generation of hospitality leaders. So when we're talking about automating emails, I have some points here. Again, not everything works for each individual organization, but there are ways to tackle this item by item to reduce the inbox, to thereby focus a person's attention on the real work by reducing the busy work. Turning off notifications, unsubscribes. You don't need to CC your boss. We should have an organization where, you know, you're the direct report, you're in charge, you own this project, just get it done, and I'll catch up with you over a daily huddle, or feel free to text me and we'll set aside a quick 5-minute call if you need help with this. There's Calendly and Doodle for setting up multi-party meetings to help organize that internally. You have shared calendars, so that way people should have the power to book meetings on your behalf and slot them into select days. That way you don't need to have all these emails just to coordinate when that meeting is going to be. There are other ways, like project management software, Asana, Slack. There's a whole bunch of other ones that have a quote unquote freemium model where you can itemize and compartmentalize tasks. So when we're talking about compartmentalizing, we're not just talking about electronic compartmentalization, we're talking about mental compartmentalization, where if you have your tasks still within Outlook or within Gmail, you're sorting through that task, and meanwhile, all these new emails are coming in. That is stressful. But then when you switch that task over into Slack or Asana, and it's within a thread or a channel, your visual frame is focused specifically on that task, and it helps you to achieve better flow. So that way your message or your thinking for that specific task is faster and sharper to get it done faster and ultimately more productively. There are other ones here, as you can see. What I want to point out is this whole idea of multitasking. The human brain, our quote unquote caveman brain, Neolithic, Paleolithic, whatever word you want to use for it, is not designed for multitasking. We are inherently designed for monotasking, where we focus on one thing at a time, get it done to the best of our ability, and then move on. So that's what task compartmentalization and reducing all the busy work helps us do. It helps us get back to monotasking, helps us get back to flow. The other thing to consider is the relationship here between technology and dopamine within our brain, where little things like logging on to Instagram for a quick 2-minute break, it spikes our dopamine, which then can lead to an addictive pathway. So it's something that we need to teach our organizations on, because that can reorient the brain, which can then alter the flow state, which can then alter productivity and creative processes. So it is something to think about in terms of the relationship of how we're using technology, our habits, and how those habits affect productivity. And ultimately, where this comes down to is time. How we can block off pieces in larger chunks of time to devote to solving the real work and making decisions faster. So I've highlighted a few brands here that I like. There are thousands more hotels that are doing great things. I just wanted to throw these up there just to have a slider to show that there are lots of brands doing great things, working in unique spaces within the hotel world. And it all comes down to the processes that make these brands happen, but also the end vision that you have in sight. What is the brand vision? And then how do you work back from that vision to deadlines for specific tasks and measurable results and individual people that are going to measure those results and develop plans on a deadline? So now for the latter half of my presentation, I'm going to give 2 examples that are more tech specific from clients that we've worked with, and names redacted to help protect them and protect the NDA. But I just want to go through them to show you how this process underlines everything. So we were brought in for a property in New Jersey for voice channel automation, where the res team had 40 full-time equivalents, a large cost. But really, when we looked under the hood, it wasn't just reducing the reservations team that was the problem. It was looking at how do we reduce overall call volume. So it was all these other processes that were various technology projects that were quote unquote low-hanging fruit that we could solve by making decisions faster, quickly implementing them to reduce the call volume, to reduce the costs, to thereby not overload the res team. So here are some of the 7 we did. There were obviously more, but highlighting sort of a key results and key tasks that we implemented here. And I want to hold on these just to let you read everything we did. And what you'll see here is that it wasn't just looking at the reservations department and solving challenges there. It was things around the reservations department. And underlying all of these was how systems work together and implementing new technology on a very, very rapid scale to reduce call volume. So we did a website audit. We changed some pages around, got approval for that quickly, and said, hey, we need to upgrade the website so that way things are better to find online. Number 2, implementing more online merchandising. So that way everything can be booked online seamlessly, because the guests these days, they want to book from their phone while they're watching Netflix at 10 p.m. They don't necessarily want to call in to book a spa appointment or activity, and yet they still want those things to be fully available. Number 3, guests like to text. They don't like to necessarily call. That's a given. The number 4 is integrations, which I know you're all looking at. Number 5, we did investigate a new call center. That was an evaluation process where we thereby had to automate the way we evaluated the new call center, look at how we scheduled the meetings with the evaluation, developing criteria, and rapidly scaling that up to make that happen. But number 6 is the interactive voice recording, which was a little bit convoluted in terms of the press 1, press 2, press 3 options. And we looked at something new, which is called conversational AI. where it's actually a voice bot that is basically a chat GPT for voice. It can understand, with a lot of training in a sandbox, it can understand a voice, it can understand dialects, it can understand voice through background noise, it can understand what's called multi-pronged questions to thereby facilitate and eliminate the quote unquote repetitive basic questions. So thereby, when the guest who's calling in gets over to a live agent, by the time that's happened, the live agent can then focus on fulfilling that reservation and on upselling. So that way it's a higher quality call with more revenue per guest generated on that individual call. And then number 7 is working towards that holy grail of a unified guest profile via a third-party CRM, which is far easier said than done. But within this whole idea of looking at process innovation underlying everything, there was the human problems, the internal politics, where the reservation or the revenue director who led the reservation department didn't want to really help us to start off with, because there was the perceived loss of control. And again, this goes back to the fact that we're automating tasks, not jobs. No full-time equivalent employee lost their job during this whole process, not one. But we had to reassure that person of what that process was. Task automation, not job automation. We had to reassure that, because otherwise we were dealing with things where we were getting delays on reports and necessary information and all that stuff. We had to reassure. And then number 2 was from the ownership level, is the owners came to us and said, well, you want to install this conversational AI. We're not sure because our res team already does so well here, and we could automate more, but the risk is we could lose so much more revenue. So of course that was explaining the process of saying, well, we're going to put it into a sandbox, let us test it, let us evaluate it, let us get some deadlines. We will have reports for every department to implement and test and make sure they get sign off. And then we will slowly make it live. It won't be like flipping a light switch. It will be more like a dial knob on audio, where we slowly turn up the volume as we get more and more comfortable with it. So those were some of the challenges that we faced. And of course, all the solutions we identified, developing a roadmap, evaluating all the vendors, it all had to be done in a very systemized process to make it as efficient and fast as possible. So the second one we tackled was a different property, significantly smaller, but still nevertheless had problems where it was it was in the red from a financial standpoint, to say the least. And we were brought in for strategic advisory to bring it back to break even, and then to develop a plan for continual revenue growth. So they had a lot of disconnected systems to start off with. They had a strategic problem, which is they didn't have a strong reason to visit, which is to say, what is the reason why guests are coming to you versus your competitors, independent of the fact that you've undercut them on a rate or you have some loyalty program you're connected to? What is the specific reason to visit, the emotional reason? There were other things, their restaurant, their spa, their groups. We had to look at everything and how those processes, how those teams work together to grow TRevPAR. And on top of that, the organizational structure was very horizontal, where for a small company, you need to have more team empowerment, even at that small level, or else if the GM requires a tight control, the GM just gets pulled in 20 different directions, and the GM doesn't have time to think through all the business plans and to offer quality input that will work for that market, for that hotel, for that, to fulfill those owners' specific requests. It all requires higher thought, and it all has to be done on a faster timeline that does require empowerment and integrations. Semantic analysis was the end result of that. We'll get to that in a second. So again, a text-heavy slide. Lots of things to review here in terms of the specific things we did, but I'm sure that each one of you can relate to one point of these 9 here, and any one of these various acronyms I've inserted that are very hotel specific in their nature. So a lot of alphabet soup. So the bottom line here that I would emphasize is you look at implementing data connections. You can develop a good rate strategy, but you also want to look at how that rate strategy is going to work with your restaurant, with your spa, with all your other profit centers. So that way you can identify the best ways to grow revenue per guest, that TRevPAR, which also requires integration with all the other systems you have, not just the point of sale, but what the point of sale ties into, which is the inventory management system, the accounts payable, whereby if, for example, if you require direct sign off on accounts payable for all payments, all payments, and you don't have automatic AP up to, let's say, $1,000, your suppliers aren't going to be that happy, and you might end up with things that that you're out of stock with, or that have an increased cost baked into them, and that will ultimately affect the way that restaurant or anything else that is tied into that inventory system is actually run. Same thing with spa. With groups, you have group RFPs, request for proposals. All those can be automated nowadays. And even something as basic as updating the website to have more information on the front end, so that way your potential group customers, those event planners, can have more quote unquote window shopping, so they can see more. So by the time you're developing those and replying to those RFPs, you're already having a more higher level conversation and getting towards that quote, towards that contract in a much faster pace. So the semantic analysis part was, this is another holy grail of where technology can help, whereby as you start to review your reviews and you start to implement more systems that allow for better reviews and to incentivize more reviews, you start to uncover more low-hanging fruit to open up new areas to improve your guest ratings, to improve the guest experience, as well as to open up the quick wins to grow your organization. So for this specific resort, which was in rural British Columbia, we found that people were asking about accessibility, they were asking about pet friendly, they were asking about how to make restaurant and spa bookings, they were asking about what to do in the area. So your guests are basically telling you how they want to spend more money with you. But what to do first? Well, semantic analysis is using systems to help you quantify what guests are talking about based on the language that they're discussing. So it's one thing to say, oh, I'm a 4.2 out of 5 star, or I'm a 4.3, a 4.4. It's another to say, well, yes, the goal is to move from a 4.2 to a 4.4, but what are guests talking about, so that way I know what to market to them and thereby how to improve or to differentiate my product. So for this specific hotel, something like a pet-friendly room where you can carve out a specific floor or section to make them pet-friendly rooms. And yes, that does require new housekeeping SOPs, but that also means room cleaning fees. And with pet friendly, what you have to think about is part of the post-pandemic that we're seeing as a long-term trend is that people have more pets. People got more pets during the pandemic. Now they want to travel with those pets. So how do you identify whether that is meaningful for your guests to know whether you should carve out a section to make it pet friendly? Same thing with accessibility. Accessibility, as we're dealing with aging populations in advanced economies, accessibility will become an increasingly important issue. So how do you make more of your rooms ADA compliant so that way you can better target this emerging consumer group? And as well, how do you market those ADA rooms to thereby instill trust and secure more bookings? And then below that, we have the things that were basic improvements to improve our guest satisfaction. Slow towel service is something that every hotel deals with. The mini fridge and developing a more customizable mini bar, that's something that hotels are cognizant of, and it's a great way to promote the local authentic experience. Thin walls, that was something we dealt with creatively, and favorite dishes to help promote the restaurant. So there's a lot there to think about, and these are all things that you can do. It's not just about building that brand new spa. It's not just about carving out a whole floor and initiating that multi-million-dollar PIP. These are all small things you can do to help really improve the business on a continual level. So one other thing that is related to process is, as you free up more time for yourself, you also free up more time to learn and to think of more ways to apply those learnings to your own organization. And for that, my one takeaway, if there was one single takeaway, is that it's always be learning, always be reading. And I want to call out 3 specific books that I have incorporated into this presentation and incorporated into my work as a technology consultant and strategic advisors to hotels that I found incredibly important. So again, lots of text here, but very important to address the AI elephant in the room with ChatGPT coming out here. And this was a seminal book, came out nearly 10 years ago. We have this whole idea of endogenous growth theory, which is to say that doesn't matter the technology, doesn't matter the commodity or the GDP, GNP, whatever grand economic figure you want. Ultimately, growth always comes back to the people underneath and freeing up more time for people to think about the ideas and the implementation upon those ideas. The quote unquote 1% perspiration, 99 or 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. That's the one. The second half to this is, think of chess. We all know the seminal moment when the AI Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in chess in 1997. And then a year later, Garry Kasparov, the #1 chess master in the world, played with an AI, and him as the oversight with the AI beat another AI. Then from there, they developed something called freestyle chess, which is to say, group of humans, group of AIs, whatever works, a win is a win. And by 2005, with the freestyle chess tournaments, the winner was not some grandmaster and some IBM AI machination like Deep Blue. It was 3 amateur chess players with 3 different laptops sitting in the same room, running 3 different free chess AI programs, who would then work through the move on the AI, come up with their own rationale, discuss it in person, and then come back with the end result. So ultimately that showed that doesn't matter the AI, the human, It's the process and the way you work together as a team that will always win. So for that, my one word on ChatGPT, we could have a whole other session on this, is that humans, we are the brain of this statue here, which is a centaur, a mythological beast of a horse torso, a workhorse with a human brain. We are the oversight. We are the strategic guidance, the intuition, the emotion, and computers, the AI, the ChatGPT, the strong AI, the whatever you want to call it, they are the tactics and the underlying calculations of that raw data. So where we want to do by eliminating the emails, by automating meetings, eliminating the busy work, is to remove the humans from what the computer should do. So reducing the amount of tactical stuff we have to do, so that way we can all be more strategic with our time and with our decision making. The next book is completely different, but it's talking about moving up the economic value chain, where we're always thinking about services when really we're talking about personalized services, which are experiences. And the beauty of experience is that you can charge more money for them and you can command a greater brand differentiation to grow your company. And what you'll see here is that in a timeline of human history, it is the process that underlines the activation of that next level of economic value. It always comes down to process. And above process, you now have transformation, which is to say, you take an experience, you give something to the guests, they remember it, and it improves their home life, so much so that they remember you for life and they keep going back to you, the so-called customer lifetime value. And that's really where we want to get. And it all comes back to the processes you have to develop better experiences and to develop more transformative experiences to grow your company. Finally, I talked about the 2 pizza rule. Well, Jeff Bezos is all about process, believe it or not. And that process and thought about processes kind of worked out for my guess. I mean, does have Amazon. So what Jeff Bezos always talks about in all of his, public statements that he's delivered to his shareholders is this whole idea of high velocity decision making, which is to say you have these two-way door decisions, which is to say, if it's a door where you could go through and you can go back out the other way, make the decision fast. Don't let perfect stand in the way of a good enough decision. Just make it in a high velocity manner, get it out. And part of this is disagree to commit. Just disagree but commit. You can disagree on things, and in fact, that is encouraged, but ultimately, you have to, once you make a decision, you commit to it and you embrace it and you go through it. But if there ever is a way, and you identify something where it's something that is irreversible, it's a one-way door decision, which is to say, once you go through it, the door closes. That's something where you should aim to be more perfect than good. And that requires a lot of deliberate thought about what is a one-way door versus a two-way door decision. And where we're seeing this all come to a head is that if we don't enable more process innovation to enable more work versus busy work, we ultimately may be compromising our people, because those people that we want working for hotels that are the entrepreneurs that have that entrepreneurial spirit, they're builders, and builders want to build, and builders will go to companies where they're enabled to build, see their works come to fruition. So that is the risk and the reward, and that is where I leave you today. I have a few other readings here. I've highlighted these because the underlying thing is always read, always learn, always apply those learnings to your company. You have your own list of books. I'm sure these are some that have inspired me. You have your own, whatever works, just keep reading. And I've summarized this presentation in 3 points here to help focus the Q&A. And I can't thank you enough for listening to me ramble thus far, and I'll pass it back to Barbara to facilitate questions.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. We did have some discussions going on with inside the chat. So if anybody has would like to unmute and ask directly, or you can use the raise hand and then we'll call on you. That would be fine too. So yes, I also know that there was other companies that encourage when you have an idea, put it through, evaluate it later to see if it's something that would stick with inside the company. So just kind of a reaction on the last one that you talked about.
Yeah.
So we do have one raised hand right now, and Chevron, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Thanks, Barbara. Great presentation, Adam. I'll be honest, I was disturbed by my colleagues a few times, but I was still able to get, I would say, 80% of what you were sharing. Next week, Tuesday, I actually have a get-together with other department heads. And one of the things we're trying to find out, as usual, is what we can do to improve team building, what we can do for innovation and so forth. And so I work in the IT department, and what always happens, I laugh at this because the norm is always that, in IT, we don't make revenue. But while it's true that we don't make revenue, we do contribute to how revenue can be generated. And that by itself means we're a tool that many people need to take hold of, or always find out how can we do things better. And I was making a point to my team, and I'm going to ask this question because we're all working in different countries. We've all worked in technology for quite some time. We have a department, it's called Emergency Health and Safety. And I was listening to feedback from the individual who's responsible for that department. And she says, when we have an emergency on property, we're always trying to scatter around, trying to figure out, where's the nurse? Where's the nearest first aid individual, and so forth. And I said, well, it's because of how we communicate. We've been communicating with just a radio for more than 2 decades. And we've never looked at how we can innovate in that area. And I presented some cases for them where you can have radios and you can actually see on a map with satellite imagery if necessary where colleagues are. And the first thing that came up was, well, now we're going into people's privacy. We don't want to know where people are. And I said, oh, come on, guys, you're at work. It's really and truly about knowing where you're located. And we're looking at a legal issue of colleagues' privacy while they're at work, instead of looking at how we can actually use the tool to minimize on the risk to our guests. Because the guest is injured, the guest really at that point doesn't care whose privacy they're infringing on. All they're caring about is how quick can I get service? And that's what we care about. Because what will happen later is it can be a bigger legal situation for us because we weren't able to get there in time. So we can use tools to actually help provide innovation to show where's our nearest driver, because we're on a big property, it's 120 acres. Where's the nearest driver? Where's the nearest nurse? If the nurse isn't nearby, where's the nearest person who's trained in first aid? And that way we can actually improve our service, which would, similar to your case with the reservations team, all we're trying to do is we're simply trying to ensure that we can address, whether it's a guest or whether it's a colleague, we can get there faster, we can communicate better. And instead, the first thing that comes up is we're infringing on people's rights. So I don't know if anyone else has any type of tool that they use at their workplace that helps with communicating across a wide space. If you do have one, please place it in the chat so I can review it. But again, thanks, Adam. Thanks for your experiences, and thanks for taking time to share it with us.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic use case for process. I have a few comments. So number one is, of course, hazard risk, what you're talking about. That is essentially an opportunity cost, along with those 5 that I wrote there on a screen. And you know, the worst case scenario is that you're delaying and delaying this process, and you're letting something like guest privacy stand in the way of implementing the solution. And then something bad happens, and now it's an even bigger problem, which again reinforces the need for solving this relatively quickly. Number 2 is having overseen, initiated, and scheduled CPR training. CPR training can be a part of a team building process to help secure a better team. It doesn't need to be a dedicated session on CPR. It could be, you know, something where it's you're having a management getaway, and a CPR session is just something that you do as a fun team building exercise. And understanding that CPR, if you think about it, it's a skill that everyone should know in some way, shape, or form. And it's not just something that improves your ability as a hospitality professional, where your duty of care is to ensure the guest's safety, but it also extends into your personal life as well, where in case you're ever in a situation, God forbid, wherever you're in a situation where you need to use that, you're ready. So that is something that can be incorporated as a team building exercise. Number 3, in terms of putting this through and making people understand that underlying IT and the way IT works with everything is one of the first tasks that I undertake when I do a technology audit or any consulting is I say, let's put the entire tech stack into a diagram. Simple diagram, no text, no need to show version codes on-prem cloud. Let's just throw it into a diagram, show what's connected to what. And then you could send that out to every single department head, and you could go, well, you know, look at all these systems. So you use this system, you use this system, but this system's tied into here, tied into here. I'm working on this data, or I'm working on this EDI, this data connection. So really, I'm helping you in this way, shape, or form, and here's how that ties into everything else, all electronically. And then you could write out specific use cases all in a diagram sort of way. And why I emphasize diagrams is because we are living in an age of information overload, where it is very tough to get people to read documents simply because there's so many documents to read. And I emphasize book reading because book reading, I buy physical books. I don't use a Kindle or read off my laptop. So when I'm reading, I'm in flow on that book. And it helps my memory to develop and to really think about those ideas. But if it's a document that you're expecting somebody to read during the same time when they're focused on the laptop, focusing on their own work, it's much harder than something that is more illustrative or visual forward. So a tech stack diagram, or showing specific use cases for how this new technology project you want to implement will help them either on the revenue side, on the process side, or on the cost saving side. In one way, shape, or form, will help them because ultimately every single hotel, every single hospitality business moving forward is 100% dependent on technology. I can't stress that enough. Technology is going to be increasingly coming in, but technology is just the plumbing, so to speak. It goes around and it makes everything work, but that then enables everyone else to be more guest facing, whether that guest facing is for being more reactive to emergency situations or helping guests in one way or another. And on the emergency side, you can also investigate wearables, which can also work on a silent MAC address sort of way. So that's another way aside from radios, or looking at text-based systems as well that on-site employees like to work with. And a lot of that does require some more thought to a BYOD process in terms of bring your own device, which is becoming much more prevalent versus having to pay for people's cell phones. So I hope that addressed the question on multiple levels.
Well, thank you. I think we're up at the top of the hour, so we are going to officially close the Hangout, though we will all can stay on if you have more questions. Adam, thank you so much for your presentation today. I'll also say that Adam is speaking at High Tech Toronto on Thursday, the 29th of June. So his session title is The State of Blockchain in Hospitality Now and Beyond. So for those of you who are attending High Tech, I encourage you to check out his session. And next week, we do have a book club session. It's also a Hangout, and it's part of the Leadership Excellence series. And then on May 23rd, we're going to have a webinar right where AHOA's president and CEO, Laura Lee Blake, Esquire, and she will be providing an update on legislature. And with that, I thank you all for joining, and we're going to close the webinar, and hopefully see you next week.